Well, hello, Floodgate family. Thanks so much for joining us on this edition of Leadership Live. And today I am actually ecstatic because I got not one, but two amazing leaders, both from Endogenex. I have Stacey Pugh, who's the CEO, and Krissy Wright, who's the CFO, both here to talk about leadership, their lessons, and of course, the great things and the impact that Endogenex will make and is already making in the MedTech community. So thank you guys so much for joining us on this edition of Leadership Live.
Glad to be here.
Yes, thanks for having us, Joe.
Absolutely. So I've gotten an opportunity to get to know you over the years, but other people listening don't. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself and, again, and of course, some of the great work that Endogenex is doing. But Stacey, can you share a little bit about yourself first? I'd love to understand your background.
Yeah, no, a MedTech exec for 20 years. Clear that out. I'm actually a nurse by background, and I started my career on the clinical side. Ended up falling really into research and starting and running research programs on the academic health side, fell into industry, really through the med affairs clinical, became a clinical trialist over time, kind of lens, and spent the first half of my executive tenure doing work there. I went from a company, it was KCI, which became Acelity, now 3M, did a lot of the early kind of sentinel work around vac therapy and wound therapy, ended up moving into a company that was EV3, just becoming Covidien, that eventually became Medtronic on the clinical side, and had the pleasure of spending my last 5 years in Medtronic leading that stroke business. So big area of passion for me. Went out and did some time at Butterfly, really taking a very focal space where I was in an NV and broadening that out to digital health and AI and a little bit of direct to consumer, right at a de-SPACing time. So phenomenal set of digital health experience for me, but knew that I wanted to probably move back to earlier and a CEO role, and found the Endogenex technology, which is very compelling. As I had a little bit of time to reflect and I looked at this technology and this role, you realize that you've been working downstream of type 2 diabetes your whole life.
Yeah. Right.
With
especially wound care.
Wounds and then stroke. I've been working downstream from type 2. And so it's great to get to land in a place where we think we have a device solution that can really change the paradigm in type 2 diabetes.
Yeah. It's going to be that preventative instead of treatment, where you've been down
3 years.
Yeah.
3 years here working through that early pathway, and just really excited about the promise of the technology.
Really incredible. Well, Krissy, tell a little bit about you and your background, and of course, I'd love to hear your take on Endogenex.
Yeah, thanks for having us this morning. So I joined Endogenex just about a year ago. And when we think about, the why, it all comes down to the mission and the leaders that are there. And I would say throughout my career, that's been a strong passion of mine and has really led me to the companies that I've joined. So I started my career at PwC, so very classically trained finance and accounting professional. And I had the opportunity to work on the Medtronic audit. And it was there that I discovered, if you're going to stick us in the back room and we're going to look at numbers all day, you better do it for a company who matters and the work that they're doing really impacts patient lives. So I always said the only company I'd ever work for would be Medtronic if I left PwC. And I did just that. I left PwC and joined Medtronic, had the opportunity to work there in a number of different roles, see a number of different business units, impact a lot of patient lives. My last role there was leading the brain modulation business. And you can see for DBS, the impact you make on patients every day. Mm-hmm. You watch when you turn on the device and their tremors stop and they're able to drink a cup of coffee. And so it's that sort of energy and passion that really helps me figure out, which companies I want to be a part of. And so when Stacey offered me the opportunity to first come work with her, and I had that opportunity at Medtronic too, it was a no-brainer question, but also just what we're doing at Endogenex and our ability to really impact patient lives in a way that hasn't been available to them before. No pharma, no compliance issues is a strong motivator in terms of joining the company.
That's awesome. I love the way you saw that difference of coming, the backroom numbers, but saying, wait, I can make a big impact, and seeing that impact, pursuing that dream, making that happen, and really highlighted the point that, great companies. It's having that great leadership and creating that culture of that's mission driven. That is pretty unique,
Yeah.
I think, in med device. So my question for you is, besides having kind of that mission driven mentality, what other attributes do you find in good leaders in this space?
I've been super fortunate, I think, Joe, and Krissy, I'll preempt you so you don't have to say anything nice about me. But like first, I think in MedTech for sure, Joe, people got to be in it for the heart and for the right reason.
Yeah.
Right. There is just no question that that's got to be a critical driver. But I think um, I've always been drawn to visionary leaders and things that were a big challenge, and that's really kind of the reason that I made the move that I made in stroke, where I went from having a much bigger team to a really small team, but saw something in technology there. I love for myself people who are direct, straight talking, will call a spade, and allows you to really put your energy and focus into tackling the problems at hand. And I think I've been really fortunate to be groomed under a number of leaders who did that and did that well. Um, I think good leaders always find a way to ask a little bit more of you than you would ever even ask of yourself. And that draws you to step up and constantly. I mean, I can think back at a time where I had a boss who really called me on the carpet when I was upset that they hadn't given me a regulatory function that I felt like I kept having to step in and hold on to. And he said, if you want me to give you something that I already know you can do, and that's how you want to spend your mental time and bandwidth, I'll let you do that. But I don't think it's the best use of your time. Just people who would really could see beyond you and see beyond the things you were looking at here and challenge you. And I think, the really good leaders do that. And I've just been blessed with that. Now, those people are also push you hard, right? They constantly demanding of you. So.
Yeah, no, I love that. Is that you got to have that someone that has the passion, right? The ability to have that candor and straight talk, and that passion, that candor usually allows you to push yourself and identify areas beyond yourself. I love that combination that you've articulated, Krissy. I'm curious if you have anything else to add to that trifecta.
Yeah, I would say two things. One is this unending intellectual curiosity, right? What is possible? What can be next? And not being limited by this is what I've seen before. Obviously, you want to learn from your experiences and integrate them into the future, but not be limited by, I work in this bubble and that's it. Constantly be curious, constantly be asking questions. And the second thing, which may be controversial for many leaders, is low ego. And I think it's a difference between having the gravitas and the ability to, own the room and really drive followership without it's all about me. So it's sort of reversing the mirror and saying it's all about us and we are going to achieve together and we are going to make this happen versus I did this and I'm going to do this and I'm going to get all the credit. And so it's a fine balance. And I think leaders who can do those things have, at least from my perspective and experience, been the most successful.
No, I think that's an exceptional point. Great leaders, they take ownership of the blame and share the success, right? And having that mentality of doing that, I think is a great point you bring up, and having the humility, but still you need confidence, right? You got to own the room, as you said, right? To be able to get that gravitas, but have humility that allows others to be able to give, because you're only as good as what did Reagan say? You're the smartest person in the room. The first problem. So that's shouldn't be the thing.
I haven't had to worry about that for a long time now, Joe.
Hey, me neither. And it started.
Smartest person in any room.
Yeah, I'm with you. So I'm curious. You mentioned early on, right, that having that great leadership creates a culture. So what? How do you create a culture? How do you maintain it, especially through you guys are about to go through some rapid growth?
Yeah. I think you have to know what purpose your culture intends to serve, because having had the opportunity to serve under a number of leaders and in a number of different situations, I do think there are situational demands of culture, and I'll use Endogenex as an example, right? When I left Medtronic, I was running kind of a almost $1 billion business there, and we were starting to hit a different point where leverage and the capability to think about scale as a function was a different driver. You had armies of people who knew more than you did in every single function. When I came into Endogenex and we're a team of 20, you still need people who have the sophistication and the vision, but the fundamental demands of the capability to flex across, to Krissy's point about go figure it out and being a bit fearless and having extraordinary amounts of humility to say, I don't know, and I know what I don't know, because that tells you to go out. It is a little bit different skill set, and I think that affords a different culture. There are base tenets of culture. I think candor, direct, the capability to speak truth to power, to challenge assumptions and status quo are tenets of that. But I do think you got to be really cognizant of the problem you're trying to solve. You hold to your core ethics and morals, and then you know the problem you're trying to solve. And so I'm looking for people who have extraordinary amounts of resilience and the capability to play across the field. Krissy's a CFO for us. She also runs HR, and she's got, pseudo IT and facilities. And I knew, given her general management background, while she's got deep expertise on the finance side, she could swing and play across the field for me. So I think that situational awareness and really understanding what you're going to ask of people today and what you're going to ask of people in 3 to 5 years, because in these kind of hires, you're also hiring for that scalability in that future. And that scalability, to me, has always been the bigger challenge. Because at least in a growth-driven business, every day I spent some self-reflective time saying, is the business outgrowing me? Right? You assume you're actually driving all that change if you admit you're chasing it part of the time. And in that neurovascular business, we doubled the size of the business every 5 years for a period of time that was like 15 years. And I saw jobs outgrow people, and it wasn't because they weren't good people. It's just because of the demands of the growth pace was so much. So I think that paranoia about that and the understanding of how that demand is going to change across time. So it's a long-winded answer, but that it depends is always a safe answer.
Yeah, no, but I think you identify the importance of consistently reflecting on at this stage, at this company.
Yeah.
It isn't static. It's evolving. And so I hear you saying that, and I think that's a good reflection, because a lot of people's like, this is our culture, this is what's going to be, but reflect on, is it still right now? And hiring for people that have that runway to be able to evolve themselves as well. I think
and to evolve your culture,
right?
You bring people into the business to help take your culture in the direction it needs to go. It's arrogance to think that the leader is the only person who does that.
Yeah. No, I think that's good. Great. Krissy?
I would add that, Stacey talks a lot about that foundation of transparency, candor, relentlessness, etc. But we also at Endogenex, and I feel it very strongly, have a culture of we take care of ourselves and others, our team, right? We have the luxury of having 20 people, so we can know what's going on with everybody at a more intimate level and really make sure that everybody is getting what they need for when they need it, whether that be additional functional training, whether that be additional support. I think we really focus on the whole person as an employee as well. And it goes both ways. There's a lot of latitude with 20 people in the organization. You have to also be willing to raise your hand and say, I need help here, and I need, et cetera. But when you do need help or raise your hand, you've got 18 other people who jump up and are like, hey, we have a big meeting and we need to clean up this space. And so we all just grab cleaning supplies and go clean the space immediately.
Krissy's talking about Monday.
There's nothing that prevents somebody from saying, oh, I'm the X, therefore I only do Y.
Yeah,
it's
right.
What needs to get done.
There is not that's not my job in the culture.
No.
And it's a we culture. What do we need?
Dishwasher duty is an all-comers option too.
Exactly. There you go. I like it. That's good. And now I'm sure, you've never made any mistakes as a leader. But
not one this morning yet that I know of.
Not yet this morning that you're aware of. I love the qualification there.
Yeah.
But what lessons have you learned? I mean, what can you share that maybe someone doesn't have to step on that landmine that you did?
I look back and I think on, there's thousands certainly of mistakes and learnings. I tried not to make them more than once, and I try to be a student of seeing where other people have made mistakes and try to to take and catalog those. It's the beauty of getting to grow up as a general manager in a big business is you get to learn lessons from other people's mistakes, and maybe you don't have to suffer them all on your own. I think back, I can think about, and I'll give you an example in the neurovascular space. There were times where my gut was telling me something, and it was, and I maybe I pushed a conversation, but didn't push it hard enough. I saw the trend coming with aspiration, and I think I, I had an opportunity. I was leading the medical side of the business at that point in time, and you could see this kind of. You have this 4 New England Journal studies and this phenomenal data on stent retrievers, and you could see this coming in aspiration. And I remember asking my leadership team, how many times does a physician have to tell us something before it's true? And I was trying to broach a conversation and make a point, but I think I had an obligation probably to speak louder and speak clearer and speak more and more often, because I was out in the field and seeing some things. And if I think about where we were as a business and that trend, had we pushed that harder and intercepted that earlier, it certainly could have yielded something, I think, very different. And it's so easy to fall in love with your products and your data. It's also very dangerous to fall in love with your products and your data. And so, if I think about one where I clearly I owned the accountability, either whether I was that transitional time where I was heading medical and clinical for the organization, as I transitioned over and I was leading general management. I think that was a trend we didn't catch early enough, and that I have ownership for. And so I spend more time, I'll take that learning to today, that paranoid sense of what's out there that I'm kidding myself about, right? It's not about what you don't know, it's what you absolutely know that's not right. That piece in leadership has disciplined me. Like, we document critical assumptions in our business, and we put them up and we stare at them and say, are these all true? Because I just found over time that they almost become tribal knowledge to you.
Yeah,
and
they become your truth, and it's not really the truth.
Yeah. And it doesn't necessarily mean that they're true or that they're still true. So that's one where I would say I think I own some element of that as it related to this, and it does change the way I operate today to try to not make that mistake again.
Those are a couple great lessons. I think first is that the lesson that making sure that what you assumed and married to your product, that you're the best, and even when the market, the people around you are telling you with their pom-pom that that's the case, but it might not, is to act. But I think overarchingly is that lesson shaped how you approach now, but you've taken the time to reflect on those. You don't say, well, this was circumstantial. What could I have done? And take those mistakes as lessons and put that arrow in your quiver to become a better leader in the future. I think that's it's not about the errors, it's what you learn from and not making the same one twice. That's what you started.
Well, and one of the things you learn from the leadership seat, to Krissy's point about making sure you have a culture where people speak up and they can and will disagree. If I think about, all the kind of pseudo crises situations that I've managed, whether it was a product quality issue or a company acquisition that didn't go well, is I can really be reflective and look back. There was somebody in the room who knew we had a problem. There was somebody in the room who may have suggested that this was going to be a concern. And so how do you make sure you're giving voice to those things when somebody else's gut is telling them that we have an issue? That's one of the things I think is hardest about culture, is balancing being really hard driving and execution focused and making sure you leave room for the challenge. And I certainly don't think I've perfected that in any way, but it is really important.
I could see that. That's a really good point. Krissy, is there anything, lessons that maybe you've learned that you can add to or maybe potentially different?
Yeah, I think it's about stakeholder management and getting everybody in the same boat together. I would say that's a an evolving lesson. And as my roles have changed over the years, you go from having, one stakeholder, maybe your boss, or a couple, your team and your boss, to managing through a matrix of a matrix of a matrix. And then you have many different stakeholders with different competing incentives and perhaps slightly different financial objectives or incentives. And making sure that even if you're right on the decision, that doesn't matter anymore, right? When you're an individual contributor, you can be right, you can turn in your work, you get your A+ and your gold star, and you go home and you're like, thumbs up. Now, as a leader having to navigate, that's not good enough anymore. Now you have to ensure that everybody else understands the why behind it. And it's that communication and bringing along. And for those who know me, I move really fast and talk really fast and make decisions pretty fast. And so it's having to kind of pause and say, okay, have we left any stakeholders inadvertently off at the bus stop 3 doors down? And we need to go back and pick them up and bring them along to make sure that everybody's staying in line. Because to Stacey's point, if everybody's not kind of working together on that decision, you're going to get ahead, something's going to happen. And this person on the shore over here in my crazy boat analogy is going to say, oh, I knew that was terrible, because they never got the boat with you. Whereas if you're on the boat and something happens, then you're like, oh, shoot, we're in the boat. Let's start bailing out water, or what else do we need to do together? It's less of a this way and more of a, oh, we got nobody to look at except ourselves to solve whatever challenge is ahead of us. So it's that bringing people along and that constant navigation of stakeholder perspectives and making sure we're communicating at that right level.
This is an important. Sometimes you're never going to bring everyone along. I view the highest executive order function that there is the capability to disagree and still commit. And this was a lesson that it took me a while. There were going to be decisions that I was not fully aligned to. And the capability to know how to put voice to it, to make sure my perspective was represented, but knowing when it was time to disagree but commit. To Krissy's point, I think when you work within a matrix of a matrix of a matrix, you've got to also find a way to acknowledge and then put voice and acknowledgement to that. I know you don't agree here, but I'm asking you to commit. And if that's probably my highest level learning, I would say, as an executive, is to how to do that myself, but then how to make sure you're hiring people who are capable of it.
I like it. It's you need to make sure not ignore the situation, have them sitting on the shore, but realize that the team, the whole team doesn't really need to agree that getting in the boat's the right call, but the whole team needs to be on the boat and acknowledge that. So it's going slow to go fast, and I think you've shown that humility that you've got to do that first, right? As a leader, you've got to show that there's occasions that, hey, you know what? I'm not sure I would have done it that way, but let's go. Let's see what happens,
And sometimes you have the conversation and you think you communicated and then you realize you didn't. And it's having that okay, let's have a do-over. What do I need to do? Do I need a different presentation, different way of communicating? Do I need to write it down versus have a phone call versus we need to sit down and have a face-to-face meeting or a Zoom call? So, the nice thing about it is, if you acknowledge, you're like, oh, that didn't go so well, you can have a do-over in many situations, or at least try to fix the current situation.
No, I think that's awesome. One question I have for you is, obviously getting people on the boat is important, when you're making decisions, but getting people on the team, right? How do you identify and find the right people to bring on the team to begin with? Something near and dear to my heart, by the way.
Yeah, no, I understand. And I think having hired some amazingly successful hires and people that I stay in touch with, even from, 20 years ago that I used to work with, and others where you're like, oh, I really focused on core domain expertise, but not the fit itself and the learning capabilities, then it often doesn't work out because somebody's experience might not translate. So, honestly, I think it's two things. One, this intellectual curiosity. Do you have a lifelong interest of learning new things? And are you willing to do it? right? Because there are people who have the ability, but not the willingness.
Yeah.
And some people might have the willingness, but no ability at all. And I sort of feel like in many, especially in a startup environment where the role is like this, and you're kind of like, send me a job description. I'm like, do whatever it takes on whatever day, maybe in this generic area, that you really have to hire for, willingness to figure it out. And that doesn't mean you have to do it all yourself. It just means you are committed to making sure it gets done, whether that's asking for help, whether that's going and taking a training, whether that's calling 14 people that you look up on LinkedIn because they have this expertise, or you find somebody who knows somebody to get their experience and learn from the best. Not too many things we do have never, ever been done before, but you just have to be willing to say, oh, okay, I got to figure that out today. Let me make it happen. And I would say when we hire people, we really focus on those, at least for me anyways, I focus on those two areas. And yes, experience and what they've done before, expertise, education is important. But frankly, I'll take somebody without a college degree who's worked really hard to learn valuable skills, who can articulate them clearly, and who can say, I'm willing to figure it out all day, over somebody with like 3 graduate degrees and, has a lot of things on paper, but can't translate them into the real world.
Yeah, no, I love that experience, that attitude and willingness over experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
And evaluating that.
I just think there is no more important moment in your tenure with an employee than at the time of hire to be truly transparent. I think most people seek a fit that is good for them, want an opportunity in front of them that they genuinely can be successful at. But I think sometimes we don't hire with a philosophy of extreme transparency. And I think, if you're not doing that, here's the good, the bad, but most importantly, the ugly. Let's talk about that. I think if you genuinely trust that most people want that, then you give them the opportunity to self-select. And I think if we're genuine about our culture, genuine about our challenges, then you take the 80% of that fit equation that Krissy was talking about, and people will self-select out of a role if they think that's not good. So philosophically, I try to talk to every employee and say, here's the good, the bad, the ugly. I'm going to give you an honest answer to any question you can ask. Now's the time. Let's have that engagement. I think, it's a little harder. It's probably more important in a smaller company where the fit is so obviously there or not here. But I do think it should be a tenet of hiring across the board. And you get into these highly competitive spaces where you're trying to attract talent, and putting up a veil that's not true doesn't help anyone.
No. Yeah, that's such a great point. It's beyond, because it's authenticity, right? It's trust. You're building one of the most important trust things you can is you're between employer and employee out of the gate, and that starts the interview, and being transparent and is crucial. Even the ugly things, because everyone's got some ugly.
They all do. Well, and again, trust people to self-select for you. You take the best judgment you have on fit for role off the table if you misrepresent role, right?
Yeah, totally. I agree. I give advice to candidates in reverse all the time. Be authentic, be real, because the worst thing you could do is be someone you're not and get a job that is not for you, right? Because you'll be
wearing a shirt that's too small every day. Nobody actually wants to do that.
Yeah, exactly. So we get a lot of people that are listening to this or will be listening to this that might not be leaders now, but have aspirations. So what would you recommend, for them to do, or what have you seen done well for people that want to become leaders and be noticed?
So Krissy said that I think the tenet of intellectual curiosity, it's like the horsepower to everything.
Yeah.
Because intellectual curiosity doesn't mean I just want to understand how this works. I want to understand why you did something. I want to understand if this looks irrational. I mean, I can remember, I'll bring it on myself. I can remember times when there's a lawnmower out there. That always happens when you're trying to do this. Where, I could look at a decision being made by management and say, God, this looks ridiculous. And they, clearly I was absent perspective. There was some piece of the puzzle that I didn't have, or that piece of perspective that I didn't appreciate. And being intellectually curious about why does this look so different to me, and taking the time to go gain that perspective and ask that question again from a different lens, I think is just foundational to being able to grow and roll, to appreciate the challenges that exist within managing teams and managing groups of people. So, genuine intellectual curiosity about people, about why they see things differently, about why we make decisions that we make is the most critical first step for anyone.
Yeah, no, I love that. It's just that intellectual curiosity, and your example's right. Is why in the world would we make that decision instead of judging the decision? Be intellectually curious. What led you to that decision?
Yeah.
And you can learn from it. I think that's a great.
Well,
People say intellectual curiosity, but I think that's putting it to work that
yeah.
people can take and use, and I love that idea.
Well, help me understand is one of the most powerful phrases, no matter where you sit in the organization, because I find that it's just as important for me now in the seat that I sit in as a CEO. When I don't agree with you, help me understand. What about this am I missing? What piece of information are we aligning differently? That same tool can be used by somebody who wants that next level and wants that next shot. When you see something, can you take a few minutes and help me understand why?
Yeah.
Help me understand if. It's an extraordinary, powerful phrase. I think I had a leader and a mentor who helped take some of my edges off, because I had some real edges earlier in my career. That phrase was taught to me. I wish it had been taught to me earlier, but it's such a powerful tool.
I love that. That's great. Help me understand, how to, why this is occurring, and it's not a judging. As you ask a judging question, the defenses go up and the truth never comes out. But help me understand, and true curiosity factor is a great leadership tool to really uncover the root thinking that can either change your mind or provide more tactical coaching, right? So that's great. Krissy, I'm curious, what would you recommend for someone that's wanting to be tapped, leadership? How would you recommend them to be noticed or recognized?
I would say pay attention and listen outside of your own function. So when you have the opportunity to go with your manager to a cross-functional meeting, really listen to what the other functional leaders are talking about. You start to hear the same issues come up over and over again. You get to understand, oh, well, if something happens in quality, that might impact the timing of our development, and that might impact the financial implications, and start trying to make those connections yourself. If you're unable to or unsure, then talk to somebody after the meeting. Our CFO at Medtronic always said that her mother told her she had 2 ears and 1 mouth and she should use them proportionately. And so that's also a skill I continue to try to practice. But I think having the ability to really listen and digest more information, it's almost like an apprenticeship to leadership.
Yeah.
You can see how other people behave in certain situations. What happens when there's a crisis? Does the leader run around with hair on fire, or does everybody get really calm and quiet and very focused, and we start to go into solutions mode? If there's a challenge that happens, do you see the leader take accountability for it and come with possible solutions, or do you see everybody run and hide and stand in a circle pointing left? And so you start to see what works, what doesn't work. Write down to yourself, never do that in a meeting, or, oh, that was a great phrase. And then when you have the opportunity, you can practice. You're already seeing what happens when, so it's not as scary to try it out.
I love it. Just that observation, it kind of leans back to that intellectual curiosity you're talking about, right? That we were talking about a moment ago, and going there. I really kind of a fun question for you guys, kind of to end this up and end it on a fun note. Who's your favorite superhero, and why? I'll put Stacey on the hot seat first here.
Well, Wonder Woman. I just like it's right. You have to seeing powerful women who can step in her own right. The backstory behind that, I think for me is probably mine.
Yeah, I love it. And I'm going to ask another question. Speaking about Wonder Women, you guys all have a unique demographics in leadership, right? The entire executive team is a female-led executive.
Not entire. No, not
Not
entire. We do have. So it's Krissy, myself. We have a phenomenal Leanne Cunningham who leads our clinical function. Melanie Hess who leads our regulatory function. So we're flipped from the demographics I've lived my whole life. But I got to tell you, Chris Sorley and Matt Kimbrough, our R&D and medical officer, are powerhouse contributors. So it is a little unusual. Our demographics, I think, for MedTech leadership. Some of these people were here when I came, and they are still here because they are just phenomenal people. I've had the opportunity to recruit who I thought was the best people I could go get my hands on, and the demographics worked out this way. It is nice. There were times I can remember when I started my executive leadership role in neurovascular, I was the only woman in the room. And there have been a number of times throughout my career, but it's really nice to see that, I think, that balance starting to evolve and those opportunities to show up more.
Right. Krissy, I'm curious on your favorite superhero and why.
So I'm going to go with Iron Man. Just because it's a juxtaposition of like super creative engineering, comes up with all these crazy ideas, and also a little bit self-deprecating, can sort of laugh at himself and has a very sort of dry sense of humor.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go with Iron Man.
Yeah.
That's
kind of create it, does it, but also is it,
If I had a superpower that I'd like to have, it would be, random flying ability. So.
Well, guys, thank you so much for taking the time to join us on this edition of Leadership Live. I know I learned a ton about leadership, learned a ton about what's happening, great things at Endogenex. And so thank you for taking the time. And please comment below. We'll be monitoring this feed. If there's some comments or questions, or you want to get in touch, learn more about Endogenex, please comment below, and we'll be monitoring that and being able to answer those questions. So thank everyone so much for joining on this edition of Leadership Live. Thank you, Stacey.
Thanks, Joe.
Thanks, Joe.
Bye.